She thought no one would ever stand up for her and her son until a stranger from a different world stepped in with a promise that would change everything. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. Texas, 1853. The merciless summer sun beat down on the small frontier town of Willow Creek. Margaret Wilson dabbed at her perspiring brow as she hung laundry in the yard behind her modest cabin. Her eyes darted nervously to the house where her 5-year-old son Timothy slept. Born with a condition that left his bones fragile and malformed, the boy couldn't walk or run like other children. The townsfolk called him Boneless, a cruel nickname that cut Margaret to her core. "Margaret, get in here." The sharp voice of her husband Frank shattered the morning quiet. She flinched, dropping the wet sheet back into the basket. Inside, Frank stood over Timothy's bed, his face contorted with anger. The boy soiled himself again. "Clean it up." He kicked the wooden bed frame, causing Timothy to whimper. "Please, Frank," Margaret whispered. "He can't help it." "Can't help it?" Frank spat. "A man's son should stand on his own 2 feet, not lie in bed like a useless sack of potatoes." He grabbed Margaret's arm, fingers digging into her flesh. "I'm the laughingstock of the town because of him, because of you." Margaret bit her lip until she tasted blood. Timothy's eyes, wide with fear, locked with hers as Frank stormed out. Only when the door slammed did she exhale. "I'm sorry, Mama," Timothy's small voice quavered. "Hush now," she soothed, stroking his forehead. "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault." Later that day, Margaret ventured into town for supplies, Timothy wrapped in a blanket and carried in her arms. The stares followed them, some pitying, most judgmental. At the general store, she placed Timothy carefully on a chair while she gathered their meager purchases. Mrs. Wilson, the storekeeper, Mr. Abernathy, acknowledged her with a curt nod. "Your husband was in earlier. Said to put your purchases on his account." "Thank you," Margaret murmured, knowing full well Frank would berate her later for every penny spent. As she turned to leave, a group of men entered, Frank among them. He'd been drinking. She could tell by the flush of his face, the loose swagger of his gait. "There she is," Frank announced loudly. "My wife and my ... son." He emphasized the last word with cruel sarcasm. Margaret clutched Timothy tighter, attempting to push past the men. "Hold on now," said one of Frank's companions, blocking her path. "Let's have a look at the boy. He's got no bones to speak of." "Please," Margaret whispered. "We need to get home." Frank grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. "Show them, Margaret. Show them what a disappointment you've given me." Before she could react, Frank yanked the blanket away, exposing Timothy's twisted limbs. The boy cried out, instinctively trying to hide his face against his mother's chest. "See that?" Frank laughed bitterly. "Can't even stand. 5 years old and useless as a newborn calf." Tears streamed down Margaret's face as the men gawked. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat uncomfortably but said nothing. "Frank, please," Margaret begged. "Not here." "Where then?" he sneered. "At home, where no one can see what a burden you've brought on me." His hand shot out, striking her across the face. Margaret stumbled back, nearly dropping Timothy. The boy's terrified wail filled the store. "Enough." The voice was deep, commanding, and it didn't belong to anyone in Frank's circle. The men parted, revealing a tall figure in the doorway. He wore a mix of traditional Comanche clothing and elements adopted from white settlers' buckskin leggings, a cotton shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. A long knife hung at his side. "This is no concern of yours, Indian," Frank spat. The Comanche warrior stepped forward, his dark eyes taking in the scene. "A man who strikes a woman holding a child is no man at all." Frank's face darkened with rage. "You dare lecture me? This is my wife, my son, and that gives you the right to harm them?" The warrior's voice remained calm, but his eyes flashed dangerously. "Get out of here, Red Wolf," Mr. Abernathy intervened nervously. "Don't want any trouble." So that was his name, Red Wolf. Margaret had heard of him. A Comanche who sometimes traded with the townsfolk, known to be fair in his dealings but fiercely protective of his principles. Frank lunged forward, but Red Wolf sidestepped him easily. "You're drunk," he stated flatly. "Go home and clear your head." "I'll go when I'm good and ready," Frank snarled. "And I'll take what's mine with me." He reached for Margaret again. In one fluid motion, Red Wolf positioned himself between them. "The woman and child leave in peace." Frank's hand moved to his pistol, but Red Wolf's hand was already on his knife. The store fell silent. "Frank," one of his friends urged, "let it go. Not worth getting gutted over." After a tense moment, Frank spat on the floor. "Take them then. But they'd better not be at my house when I return." He stormed out, his friends following. Margaret stood trembling, Timothy crying softly against her. Red Wolf turned to her. "You have somewhere to go?" She shook her head, reality crashing down. "No family, no friends willing to defy Frank's anger." "I have a camp outside town," Red Wolf said. "It's safe there until you decide what to do." Margaret hesitated, torn between fear of the unknown and fear of returning home. Red Wolf's eyes softened as they fell on Timothy. He reached out, gently touching the boy's head. "No child deserves cruelty. No mother either." Looking into his eyes, Margaret made her decision. "Thank you," she whispered. As they left the store, Red Wolf spoke quietly, his voice carrying a solemn promise. "I swear to protect you both." Red Wolf's camp lay nestled in a secluded clearing about 2 miles outside Willow Creek, sheltered by towering oak trees. A small creek babbled nearby, providing fresh water. A modest teepee stood alongside a more permanent wooden structure, a simple cabin built in the white man's style, but adorned with Comanche symbols. "You live here alone?" Margaret asked as Red Wolf helped her down from his horse. She still clutched Timothy tightly, the boy's eyes wide with wonder at their new surroundings. "My people's band moves with the seasons," Red Wolf explained, "but I stay here most times now." His voice held a note of something Margaret couldn't quite identify. Perhaps loss, perhaps resignation. Inside the cabin, Margaret was surprised by its orderliness. A fire pit in the center, surrounded by furs and blankets. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams, filling the air with earthy fragrances. "You can rest here." Red Wolf indicated a pile of soft furs. "I will prepare food." Margaret gently laid Timothy down, arranging his limbs carefully as she always did. The boy's eyes followed Red Wolf's movements with curiosity. "Are you really an Indian?" Timothy asked suddenly. Margaret gasped. "Timothy, that's not polite to." But Red Wolf smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. "I am Comanche. My people are the lords of the plains." Timothy's face lit up. "Pa says Indians are savages." He looked at his mother. "But Pa says lots of things that make Mama cry." Red Wolf knelt beside the boy, studying his twisted limbs without judgment or pity, just calm acceptance that Margaret found strangely comforting. "Your body is different," Red Wolf said simply, "but your spirit is strong. I see it in your eyes." Timothy beamed at this assessment. No one had ever suggested he might be strong before. As night fell, Red Wolf built up the fire and prepared a simple stew of rabbit and wild onions. The three ate in companionable silence until Timothy fell asleep, exhaustion finally claiming him. "Your son's condition," Red Wolf said quietly. "I have seen it before, among my people." Margaret looked up in surprise. "You have?" He nodded. "A child born to one of our band had bones that broke easily, limbs that would not straighten. Our medicine woman treated him with special herbs, wrapped his limbs to give them strength. Did it help?" Margaret asked, hope creeping into her voice for the first time in years. "Some. He lived to become a man, though he could not be a warrior." Red Wolf's eyes reflected the firelight. "He became a storyteller, keeper of our histories. His value to the band was never questioned." Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. "In town they call him Boneless. They say he's worthless, a burden." "Your townspeople lack wisdom," Red Wolf stated flatly. "Every life has purpose." "Frank wasn't always like this," Margaret said softly. "When we married, he was kind." But when Timothy was born ... double quotes, she trailed off, lost in painful memories. Some men cannot face what they don't understand, Red Wolf offered. They turn fear to anger. What will happen tomorrow? Margaret asked, the question that had been weighing on her mind finally surfacing. That is for you to decide, Red Wolf replied. You and your son can stay here as long as needed. Frank will come looking for us, she warned. Red Wolf's expression hardened. Let him come. The next morning, Margaret woke to find Timothy already awake. Sitting outside with Red Wolf, the warrior was showing the boy how to carve a small wooden animal. See how the knife follows the grain? Red Wolf was explaining patiently. The wood tells us what it wants to become. Timothy's face was screwed up in concentration as he watched. Never had Margaret seen him so engaged, so present in the moment rather than withdrawn into himself as he usually was around Frank. Good morning, she called softly. Timothy looked up with a smile brighter than she'd seen in months. Mama, Red Wolf is teaching me to carve. He says I can make a horse. With practice, Red Wolf amended, his usual seriousness softened by a gentle expression. I need to go into town, Margaret said. There are things we need if we're to stay. Red Wolf nodded. I will accompany you. No, Margaret shook her head. It would only provoke Frank more to see us together. I need to face him alone, get our belongings. Red Wolf studied her face. You intend to return to him? No, Margaret said firmly. But I won't leave with nothing but the clothes on our backs. Timothy needs his medicines, his special chair. And she hesitated. I have a small amount of money hidden away. Just enough to perhaps start somewhere new. After much discussion, Red Wolf reluctantly agreed, but insisted on waiting at the edge of town. Margaret left Timothy in his care, promising to return by midday. The walk to town seemed both too short and endless. Margaret rehearsed what she would say to Frank, scenarios playing through her mind. But when she reached their cabin, she found it empty. Quickly, she gathered Timothy's things, his medicines, the specially made chair that helped support his back, a few toys and clothes. From beneath a loose floorboard under their bed, she retrieved a small cloth pouch containing the coins she'd secretly saved over the years, 1 penny at a time from household money. As she was about to leave, the door crashed open. Frank stood there, unshaven, eyes bloodshot from a night of drinking. So you came crawling back, he sneered, blocking the doorway. I'm only here for Timothy's things, Margaret replied, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Frank's gaze fell on the packed bundle in her arms. Running away with that savage, are you? The whole town's talking about it. Please move, Frank. I don't want trouble. He stepped forward, menacing. That's my son. Mine. You think I'll let some Indian take what's mine? You've never treated him as yours, Margaret shot back, anger finally breaking through her fear. You've never shown him anything but contempt. Frank's hand shot out, grabbing her throat. You ungrateful whore. After everything I've done, let her go. The voice from the doorway was like ice. Red Wolf stood there, knife drawn, eyes locked on Frank's hand at Margaret's throat. I told you to wait at the edge of town, Margaret gasped. The boy was worried, Red Wolf replied, not taking his eyes off Frank, as was I. Frank released Margaret, turning to face Red Wolf. This is my house, she's my wife. She doesn't want to be, not anymore. Red Wolf's stance was relaxed but ready. Step aside. Let her pass. Frank reached for the rifle that hung over the door, but Red Wolf moved with startling speed. In an instant, Frank found himself pinned against the wall, the knife at his throat. Think carefully, Red Wolf whispered. Is it worth dying for your pride? For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Frank's shoulders slumped. Take them, he muttered. The boy's nothing but a burden anyway. Red Wolf released him, backing toward the door where Margaret stood clutching her bundle. We're leaving now, he said calmly. If you follow, if you try to take them back by force, I will not be so merciful next time. As they walked away from the cabin, Margaret's legs trembled so badly she could barely stand. Red Wolf took the bundle from her arms, then unexpectedly placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. You showed great courage, he said simply. I was terrified, she admitted. Courage is not the absence of fear, Red Wolf replied. It is action despite fear. When they returned to the camp, Timothy's face lit up at the sight of his mother and his special chair. As Red Wolf set up the chair near the fire, Timothy asked innocently, "Are we going to live here now, Mama?" Margaret looked at Red Wolf, uncertainty in her eyes. "For as long as you need," Red Wolf answered for her. "I swore to protect you both. I keep my word." That night, as Timothy slept peacefully for the first time in months, Margaret sat by the fire with Red Wolf, planning their uncertain future one careful step at a time. Weeks passed, and summer gradually yielded to the first hints of autumn. The leaves on the oaks surrounding Red Wolf's camp began to show touches of gold and russet. For Margaret and Timothy, each day brought small revelations and quiet healing. Timothy flourished under Red Wolf's patient attention. Though his body remained frail, his spirit grew stronger. Red Wolf fashioned him a special harness of soft leather that supported his back and legs, allowing him to sit upright for longer periods without pain. With Margaret's permission, he began treating the boy with herbal poultices and teas from Comanche medicine traditions. "This is bearberry," Red Wolf explained one morning, showing Timothy a handful of small red berries. "It strengthens the body's water." "What's the body's water?" Timothy asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "The blood, the tears, the sweat," Red Wolf replied, crushing the berries into a wooden cup. "All that flows within us and keeps us alive." Margaret watched from nearby as she mended clothing. The change in her son was remarkable. His complexion had improved, and while he would never run or walk normally, he seemed to suffer less pain. More striking was the change in his demeanor. Gone was the withdrawn, frightened child, replaced by a boy full of questions and eager to learn. "You've done more for him in weeks than the doctor in town did in years," Margaret observed that evening as they sat by the fire, Timothy already asleep. "Your doctors look only at the body," Red Wolf replied. "They do not see how the spirit and body are one." Margaret studied his face in the firelight. Though he rarely spoke of himself, she had pieced together parts of his story. He had been educated for a time at a mission school, which explained his perfect English. His band had been decimated by a smallpox epidemic years ago, leaving him one of the few survivors. Rather than join another band, he had chosen this solitary existence between two worlds. "Why did you help us that day?" she asked suddenly. "You could have walked away." Red Wolf was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. "Many years ago, I had a sister," he finally said, his voice soft. "She married a white trader who seemed kind at first. He wasn't. When I found them again, she was like a shadow of herself, her spirit nearly broken. I was too late to save her." Margaret's hand instinctively reached for his. "I'm sorry. When I saw you in the store with your son ... double quotes," he paused. "I would not be too late again." Their hands remained joined as the fire crackled and night deepened around them. The peaceful routine they had established was shattered 3 days later. Margaret was at the creek washing clothes when she heard hoofbeats approaching the camp. Her heart lurched with fear. Frank had found them. Rushing back, she found not Frank but Sheriff Mills from Willow Creek, along with 2 other men she recognized as town council members. They had dismounted and stood awkwardly near the cabin. Red Wolf stood before them, his posture tense but controlled, Timothy half hidden behind him. "Mrs. Wilson," Sheriff Mills nodded at her approach. "We've come to speak with you." "What's happened?" Margaret asked, instinctively moving to Timothy's side. "It's your husband, ma'am. There was an incident at the saloon last night." The sheriff removed his hat. "Frank drew on Jim Pearson over a card game. Jim was faster. I'm sorry to tell you Frank didn't make it." The news hit Margaret like a physical blow. Despite everything, Frank had been her husband, once a man she had loved. "I see," she managed to say, feeling Timothy's small hand slip into hers. "There's the matter of your property," one of the council members spoke up. "The cabin and what's in it." "By rights, it's yours now, Mrs. Wilson." Margaret nodded slowly, thoughts racing. The cabin represented security, a real roof. a legitimate place in the community for her and Timothy. Yet the thought of returning to town, facing the stares and whispers. "There's something else," Sheriff Mills added, looking uncomfortable. "Some folks in town have been talking about you living out here with ... quotes. He glanced at Red Wolf. "Well, there's been talk. Not proper for a widow, they're saying." "I see," Margaret said again, her voice hardening. "And these folks showed such concern for my propriety when my husband was beating me in public? The men have the grace to look ashamed." "What would you have me do, Sheriff?" she asked. "Return to town where my son is mocked and called boneless? Where no one lifted a finger to help us?" "Times are changing, Mrs. Wilson," the other council member spoke up. "The railroad's coming through next spring. Town's growing. We're getting a proper school. Your boy could—" "My boy has a name," Margaret interrupted. "It's Timothy." Red Wolf, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "What do you want, Margaret?" he asked quietly. "Not what they want. What do you want?" All eyes turned to her. For so long, her choices had been made for her by circumstances, by Frank, by the expectations of others. Now, faced with a real decision, she found herself strangely calm. "I want to sell the cabin and whatever's in it," she said firmly. "Sheriff, if you'll handle the sale for me, I'd be grateful." "And then?" Sheriff Mills asked. Margaret looked at Red Wolf, a question in her eyes. He gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Then Timothy and I will be moving on," she answered. "Somewhere new." After the men left, promising to return with paperwork for the sale, Margaret sat heavily on a log, the reality of Frank's death finally sinking in. "Are you sad, Mama?" Timothy asked, climbing carefully into her lap with Red Wolf's help. "A little," she admitted. "I'm sad for the man your father once was, before anger changed him." Timothy nodded solemnly. "Will we really go somewhere new?" Margaret glanced at Red Wolf, who was giving them space but remained within earshot. "Would you like that?" she asked her son. "To go somewhere people don't know us, don't have ideas about who we are?" Timothy considered this. "Can Red Wolf come too?" The question hung in the air. Margaret looked up to find Red Wolf watching them, his expression unreadable. Later that night, after Timothy was asleep, Margaret found Red Wolf sitting by the creek, carving a piece of wood by moonlight. "I didn't have a chance to thank you," she said, sitting beside him, "for everything you've done for us." "No thanks are needed." "Timothy asked if you would come with us," Margaret said carefully. "When we leave." Red Wolf's hands stilled. "And what did you tell him?" "That I would ask you." She took a deep breath. "I know you have your life here, your connection to this land." "I wouldn't presume. My connection is to the people, not the place," Red Wolf interrupted. "My band traveled the plains. We did not root ourselves like trees. But your home, this camp you've built ... double quotes. A camp can be rebuilt." He turned to face her fully. "What are you really asking, Margaret?" In the silvery moonlight, Margaret gathered her courage. "I'm asking if you would consider coming with us. Not out of obligation or because of your promise to protect us, but because ... double quotes," she faltered. "Because," he prompted gently. "Because I've come to care for you," she finished simply. "And I believe you care for us too." Red Wolf set aside his carving. "Among my people, a warrior does not speak of his feelings easily. But yes, I care for you both." His hand found hers in the darkness. "Where would we go?" "West," Margaret suggested. "California, perhaps. They say it's different there, more accepting of unusual arrangements. Is that what we are? An unusual arrangement?" There was a hint of amusement in his voice. "What would your people call it?" she asked. "Family," he answered simply. "Different paths that have joined to make one." 3 days later, Sheriff Mills returned with the sale papers and news that a family new to the area was interested in buying Frank's cabin. The price offered was fair enough to purchase wagon, supplies, and passage west. As Margaret signed the papers, Sheriff Mills cleared his throat awkwardly. "Mrs. Wilson, I feel I should warn you, life won't be easy for a white woman and a Comanche man traveling together with a child." "Life hasn't been easy for a long time, Sheriff," Margaret replied calmly. But for the first time, I'm not afraid of what comes next." The sheriff nodded, something like respect in his eyes. "Good luck to you then, ma'am." That evening, as they began preparations for their journey, Red Wolf presented Timothy with a completed carving, a perfect miniature horse, every detail rendered with extraordinary care. "For you to remember that even small things can have great strength," he told the boy. Timothy clutched the wooden horse to his chest. "I'll keep it forever." As Margaret watched them, she felt a sense of peace she had thought lost forever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, a family forged not by blood or convention, but by choice and compassion. The journey west tested them in ways Margaret could never have anticipated. October brought early frosts as their wagon train crossed the vast plains of the Western Territories. Timothy's condition made the rough travel especially difficult. Despite the cushioned seat Red Wolf had fashioned for him inside their wagon. Yet for every hardship, there were unexpected joys. Timothy became the unofficial storyteller of their small wagon train, regaling fellow travelers with tales Red Wolf had taught him Comanche legends adapted for his young audience, who gathered around their campfire each evening. And the coyote looked up at the stars. Timothy concluded one such tale, his small voice animated with excitement, and promised never to be so greedy again. That's why coyotes howl at night. They're reminding each other of that promise. The children applauded while their parents exchanged indulgent smiles. If they had initial reservations about the unusual family joining their company, a white widow, her disabled son, and a Comanche man whose relationship to them remained diplomatically undefined, those concerns had largely faded over weeks of shared trials. Not everyone was so accepting. Two brothers from Tennessee, the Hardings, made their disapproval plain with muttered comments and cold stares. Red Wolf ignored them with dignified indifference, but Margaret noticed how he positioned himself between them and Timothy whenever they were nearby. "They fear what they don't understand," Red Wolf told her one night as they sat apart from the others, watching the stars emerge above the endless prairie. "It's not personal, isn't it?" Margaret sighed. "Will it always be this way?" Red Wolf considered before answering. "Perhaps not always. But for now, yes, we must accept this." "How do you bear it so calmly?" she asked. "The way some of them look at you." A rare smile touched his lips. "I was Comanche before I met you. I am accustomed to white men's stares." The wagon master, a gruff but fair man named Davis, generally kept the peace. But as they entered the mountain passes leading toward California, tensions rose. Supplies ran low, the trail grew steeper, and tempers frayed. It was Timothy who inadvertently brought matters to a head. One evening, as the temperature dropped and snow threatened, the boy developed a high fever. Margaret sat with him through the night, applying cool cloths to his forehead while Red Wolf brewed medicinal tea from herbs he'd gathered along the way. By morning, Timothy was worse. His breathing came in labored gasps, his small body burning with fever. "He needs a doctor," Margaret whispered, fighting panic. "The nearest settlement is 2 days ahead," Davis informed them after checking on the boy. "But in this condition, ... "I know of another way," Red Wolf said. "A valley half a day's ride from here. There's a hot spring with healing properties. My people used it for generations." "Indian medicine," scoffed Ben Harding, who had come to investigate the commotion. "The boy needs real doctoring, not pagan rituals." "He needs help now," Red Wolf replied evenly. "The spring will bring down his fever." "I won't risk delaying the whole train," Davis said. "We've got weather coming in." "I'll take him myself," Red Wolf decided. "You can continue. We'll catch up when he's stronger." Margaret nodded firmly. "I'm going too, of course." Davis looked troubled. "Separating from the train is dangerous. Indians in these parts aren't as friendly as—" He trailed off, glancing awkwardly at Red Wolf. "As me?" Red Wolf finished for him. "The Ute who claim this territory are known to me. They will not harm us if we respect their land." "This is madness," Ben Harding interjected. "You're letting this savage lead a white woman and child into wilderness on some fool's errand?" Margaret stood, her patience finally exhausted. This savage, as you call him, has shown more humanity than most civilized men I've known. My son's life is at stake. I trust Red Wolf with that life and with my own." Davis made a final attempt to dissuade them, but ultimately helped them prepare a small pack horse with essential supplies. As they prepared to leave, several families came forward with additional offerings: a thick quilt, extra food, medicines. "We'll wait 3 days at the Western Pass," Davis told them. "After that, we must continue." Red Wolf nodded. "We understand." With Timothy carefully wrapped and secured in Red Wolf's arms, they set off at first light, leaving the wagon train behind. The trail Red Wolf chose was barely visible, winding through dense pine forest and rocky outcroppings. "Are you certain of this path?" Margaret asked after several hours of difficult travel. "I came this way once, many years ago," Red Wolf assured her. "The springs lie in a hidden valley ahead." By midday, Timothy's condition had worsened. His breathing was shallow, his skin hot to the touch despite the cold mountain air. "How much further?" Margaret asked, unable to keep the fear from her voice. "Just beyond that ridge," Red Wolf pointed. "Listen, you can hear the water." Sure enough, a faint rushing sound carried on the wind. They crested the ridge, and Margaret gasped at the sight below. A small valley, sheltered by towering cliffs, lay before them. Steam rose from a series of pools that glimmered turquoise against the snow-dusted ground. The air was noticeably warmer here, rich with mineral scents. They made their way carefully down to the largest pool. Red Wolf tested the water with his hand. "Good," he nodded. "Not too hot." With infinite gentleness, he unwrapped Timothy and removed the boy's clothes. "The minerals will draw out the fever," he explained to Margaret. "But he must be fully immersed." "Is it safe?" Margaret asked, eyeing the steaming water anxiously. "I will hold him," Red Wolf promised. "He will not sink." Red Wolf removed his own shirt and stepped into the pool, the water reaching his waist. Margaret handed Timothy to him, and Red Wolf cradled the boy carefully, gradually lowering him into the mineral-rich water until only his face remained above the surface. At first, Timothy whimpered in protest. Then, slowly, his features relaxed as the warm water enveloped him. The ancients believed these waters were a gift from the Creator. Red Wolf told Margaret as she knelt anxiously at the pool's edge. "They come from deep within the earth, carrying medicine no man could make." For hours they remained thus, Red Wolf standing patiently in the pool, supporting Timothy's frail body, while Margaret kept vigil, occasionally wetting the boy's forehead with cool water from a nearby stream. As sunset painted the cliffs in shades of amber and gold, Timothy's eyes fluttered open. "Mama?" he called, his voice weak but clear. Margaret's tears of relief fell into the mineral pool. "I'm here, darling. We're all here." That night, they made camp near the springs. Timothy's fever had broken, though he remained weak. As he slept peacefully between them, wrapped in the donated quilt, Margaret turned to Red Wolf. "You saved him," she said simply. "The springs saved him," Red Wolf corrected. "I only remembered the way. Why did you never speak of your connection to this place before?" Red Wolf gazed into the small fire he had built. "Some knowledge is sacred, to be shared only when needed." He looked up at the star-filled sky. "My grandmother brought me here when I was not much older than Timothy. I had a fever that wouldn't break." The tribal medicine man had given up hope. "Your grandmother saved you then," Margaret observed. "Yes." His voice grew soft with memory. "She was very wise. She would have liked you." "Would she have approved of us?" Margaret asked, the question that had long lingered between them finally spoken aloud. Red Wolf was silent for a moment. "She would have seen your heart as I do. That would be enough." In the flickering firelight, Margaret moved closer to him. Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining. "When we reach California," she said softly, "what happens then?" "We begin," he answered simply. "We build something new. The three of us?" "Yes." He squeezed her hand. "I swore to protect you both. That oath does not end with this journey. And if it's more than protection I want?" Margaret asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Red Wolf turned to face her fully. What is it you want, Margaret? A life together, a real family. Not just protection, but ... She hesitated, then found her courage. But love. Love, he repeated, as if testing the word. In my language, we do not have this exact word. We speak instead of the binding of souls, of two becoming as one. His free hand gently touched her face. Is this what you mean? Yes, she breathed. Exactly that. Under the vast canopy of stars, their lips met in a first tentative kiss, a promise of the life awaiting them. They rejoined the wagon train 3 days later, Timothy still weak but recovering, his eyes bright with excitement about the magic water that had healed him. If the Harding brothers had anything to say about their return, a stern look from Davis silenced them. As the wagon train continued its westward journey through the mountain passes, Margaret often found herself gazing ahead, not just at the trail before them, but at the future unfolding. There would be challenges, still a society that might never fully accept them, Timothy's condition that would always require special care. Yet for the first time in her life, these challenges did not fill her with dread. Looking at Red Wolf guiding their wagon, at Timothy sitting beside him learning to hold the reins, she felt something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. One evening, as they made camp high in the mountains with California's promised land nearly within reach, Timothy asked a question that had clearly been on his mind. Red Wolf, he said seriously, when we get to California, will you be my father? Red Wolf glanced at Margaret, then back at the boy. Would you want that? Timothy nodded solemnly. More than anything. Then yes, Red Wolf answered, his usually stoic expression softening. I would be honored to be your father. And will you still protect us? Timothy persisted. Like you promised? Red Wolf gathered both Timothy and Margaret into his embrace. Always, he vowed. With everything I am, I will protect you both. Not because I swore an oath, but because you are my heart now. As the first stars appeared above the mountains, Margaret realized the truth of what Red Wolf had been teaching them all along. Family was not defined by blood or by society's rules. It was forged through love, through choosing each other every day, through standing together against whatever storms might come. And in that knowledge, she found peace.